Welcome to Slayer the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, let's discuss the new Metallica album, 72 Seasons. There's very few bands out there in the hard rock and heavy metal world that when they release a new album, the world stops turning, and Metallica is one of those bands. The only other band that I can really think of off the top of my head is like AC/DC. Maybe if Guns N' Roses comes out with a new record, but when Metallica puts out an album, everybody is talking about it. Everybody and their grandmother is reviewing it on YouTube, and I've got to be honest with you. I'm sort of struggling with this album, and I'm struggling with it because I don't know what to make of it. There's some things on it that I like, and there's other things on it that I don't really like. And I've gone through different phases with this record, and especially with making this video, I originally I thought that I was going to do what I like to call my Christmas morning review. I did this with Iron Maiden and Senjutsu, where I'm sort of capturing my listening to it for the first time, those sort of emotions. I really felt inspired to do that when I listened to Senjutsu. I went out for a walk, listened to the whole thing. I felt really excited and just wanted to capture that. Well, I didn't feel excited after the first time I listened to 72 Seasons, and I thought, all right, maybe I need to give it some more listens. So I gave it some good headphone time, gave it like a listen and driving around in my car, and I was struggling with it. And what was difficult for me was there's a lot of good riffing on this album. There's a lot of energy. I think that James Hetfield sounds there's a lot of passion and emotion from his vocals. But I just don't feel particularly inspired by this album. It feels like the band is in a bit of a rut. And now, to put it out there, of course, I love the first four Metallica albums. I've even come to love the Black Album. I liked Death Magnetic and Hardwired. I liked those records. But it kind of feels like Metallica is maybe stuck in a rut here, sort of repeating themselves. And Metallica has always been a band, for better or for worse, that has evolved over time. If you look at those first four records, each one is an evolution of sorts. And then I sort of break their catalog into three or four different parts. The first four albums, then the Black Album, Load and Reload. I kind of put those together. Then I kind of describe it as their Lost in the Wilderness records, Saint Anger and Lulu, where they're trying to do something different and they're trying to find their way back and trying to meld both of their worlds together. Their first phase, the first four records, and then the next three records, and they're trying to find a way to live in both those worlds. Because Metallica is an interesting band. If you're of my age, you grew up with them during those first four records. And I'll often hear people my age say like, oh yeah, Metallica, they blew it with the Black Album. Now, I did an in defense of video of the Black Album. I'll try to remember to link it below, along with a few of my other Metallica videos. And I commented at the time that for a lot of people, the Black Album was their first Metallica album. For a lot of people, it was a gateway album into metal. But it's almost like the Black Album created a whole entirely new fan base for the band. And there's other bands that have, of course, had albums that blew up really big and brought in a bunch of new people. AC/DC, Back in Black. But they didn't feel like an entirely different fan base. And that's what it always kind of felt like with me with the Black Album. And again, I like the Black Album. So, of course, there's people that liked the first four records and the Black Album, but it brought in an influx of a whole new like generation of Metallica fans. And so Metallica almost has these two worlds. They have their early thrash classic four albums, and they have that sort of MTV radio, the big hits. I could probably play Enter Sandman for my mom, and she wouldn't have no idea who the band is, but she would probably recognize the song because it gets played in commercials and at football games and, you know, on the radio. And then after that Black Album phase, Load and Reload, it seemed like they were just lost in the wilderness a little, trying to do things, trying to be different, yet still trying to bring back a little bit of the classic sound. And then with Death Magnetic, it felt like they had sort of come back in a way, and they had managed to find a way to harken back to the early stuff, but also have elements of that Black Album era to their sound. And Hardwired felt like it followed in those same footsteps. And now this album feels too like a continuation of Hardwire. And the problem is, again, for Metallica, really the only phase in their career where I feel like a lot of the albums are sort of the same was that Black Album era. Again, I like the Black Album. Thought it was a great record. Black Album, Load and Reload, even though I think those are way inferior to the Black Album, they felt like they were trying to follow sort of the same formula as the Black Album. And this feels like they've gotten into sort of a formula for this era of where they're at right now with the band. And I almost feel bad because I'm listening to it and I'm like, man, there's a lot of energy here. There's a lot of fast, heavy, aggressive riffs. And I feel like I should like it better. But after the first, I remember I went through these phases with this video. I'm going to do it after the first listen. And I was like, and I don't feel inspired to do it after. Maybe it needs a couple more listens. Like about 3 or 4 listens in, I was like, okay, I'm just going to make the video so I don't have to listen to the record anymore. I thought, wait a minute, that's not a healthy way to approach this. And then I sort of had a weird phase where I was listening to it again and I was like, wow, maybe this is starting to click with me. And then like the next day I woke up and I tried listening to it again and I was like, maybe I'll just skip around to the songs that I don't really remember those particular songs. And I think part of the problem on the record for me, there's a couple things going on. I don't think there's enough variety on the album. And I love the first era of the band, the first 4 records. I'm sort of surprised that I kind of feel like there's too many fast things, that the songs that I do like on here tend to be the ones that are a little bit slower, a little bit more held back, have a little bit more groove and open space to them, a la the Black Album era. There are some fast things like Lux Eterna, that was the first single, I believe, from the album. I do really like that one. The title track is okay, but I kind of just feel like there's too much of the fast stuff. There's not enough variety on this album for me. And it feels like it's a point with the band that for their next record, I feel like they need to do something different. They need to move in a different direction. And I wish there was more variety on here. I wish they would mix in some different sounds, maybe some acoustic instruments, some different moods, some different feels, an instrumental that has some shifts of tempo and key changes and moods and atmospheres to it. It feels very pummeling, like you're just getting sort of hammered. And it's a long record. It is 72 minutes or 77 minutes or something like that long. I always say on this channel, I don't like super long records. It feels like a chore to get through it. I would have rather have had them pare it down. It's been, 7 years since the last Metallica record? 7, 8 years? I should have looked it up. But it's been a while since the last Metallica record. So maybe this is just the way it goes. Now, the last 2 albums were long, roughly around the same length. that this is what they do now. They only put out an album every 7 years, and they make it a long one like this. And speaking of being hammered, with the tempos and everything, let's talk about the mix. Let's talk about Lars's drum sound. It seems like Metallica, they just can't. Ever since the Black Album era, Load and Reload, there's always something weird going on with their mixes. Saint Anger is the bizarre snare drum sound. And look, I like Lars Ulrich. I did a video, an In Defense of Lars Ulrich video. I'll link that down below. I think he gets way too much criticism. But listening to this album, for one thing, and you hear me rant about this all the time on the channel, it's very fatiguing. It's very compressed. It's very loud. I can hear it distorting, and there's static. I was also listening to it, I should say, on Apple Music in Dolby Atmos, and I will say that the Dolby Atmos mix is much better than the straight stereo mix. I'm not going to get into Dolby Atmos right now. I actually have a video that I made like a week or two ago, and I was questioning whether I should release it or not because I thought maybe nobody would be interested in it. But now I feel compelled that I should release it here, discussing the Dolby Atmos mix. So there's going to be a video about Dolby Atmos that I'm going to release soon. But the Dolby Atmos mix has a lot more space to it. It has a lot more dynamics. But Lars's snare drum sound, and his drum sound in general, the kick and the snare is so, to use a metal cliche, it's on 11 all the time. And it is just plastered in your face. It's very fatiguing. There was one point when I was listening to the record where I sat down on my sofa or something, and I had the headphones on, and I must have dozed off because all of a sudden I sort of woke up and I felt startled, like it was just like this wall of sound around my ears, and that snare drum like pulled me from my slumber, dragged me out of my slumber. And it is just it's almost like now that I've noticed it, I can't unnotice it. And when I listen to the songs, it is so undynamic and so flat. It's just loud. And as I was thinking about this record, I saw a video on YouTube, a drummer explaining the Kiss song 100,000 Years and Peter Criss's drum solo on a live one, where it has that effect on the drums. And he's talking about how he thought that there was an effect that was making the snare drum sound like it was, but he explained that what it was is Peter's hitting the snare drum hard on the one beat, and then there's what's called ghost notes, where he hits the snare drum lighter, and so there's this up and down dynamic of the snare drum. And I thought, man, that is the complete opposite of this Metallica record, where the snare is just like right here, right at 11 constantly. There's even one song where he's like, and he does a lot of stuff on his snare drum where he'll do these hits and everything, and it is just so like jackhammer like that it's distracting to me. I will say it's nice that you can actually hear the bass, and in the Dolby Atmos mix, the bass is really nice. Dolby Atmos gives you this 3D sort of surround sound effect, and the bass is sitting really nice. I mentioned earlier that I think James's vocals, it's a great vocal display from James, but I just can't help thinking that it just feels kind of formulaic to me at this point, and it's hard for me to get excited about the album. Now, maybe I'm just not in the right headspace. Maybe I'll return to this record at some point in the future and just be like, wow, I get it now. This makes sense. But right now, I'm just not feeling it. And there are some things I do like on it. I liked Lux Eterna, the last song on the album, which is called Inamorata. That one I thought was really good. It was actually a pretty long song. I do like the songs that are a little bit more held back. Like, what's the one here? Crown of Barbed Wire, You Must Burn. I liked You Must Burn, but again, it's such a long record that liking 3 or 4 songs feels like you barely like the record when it's this long. So, and hey, I will say this to people. I probably should have said this at the beginning of the video. If you didn't, if the last album you liked from Metallica was Injustice for All, if you don't like Death Magnetic and Hardwired, you're not going to like this record. I mean, I'll just flat out tell you, in my opinion, you're not going to like this record. But I'm really curious. I'm curious what you guys think about this. Everybody's talking about the album. I wanted to sort of, again, I was going to wait till tomorrow. It's kind of late at night here. I was just getting ready to go to bed, and I thought, I'm going to get up tomorrow. I'm going to make notes on all the songs like everybody else is doing. And I thought, you know what? Forget it. I'm going to come on here and I'm going to talk to you guys about my struggle with this record, with making this video. And again, it's just, I can't just come flat out and say, hey, I don't like this record. You know, it's just a bad record. There's things that are good about it, but I just feel like I can't get excited about it. And it's disappointing because I see all the excitement around this album, and nobody does it like Metallica, really. I mean, again, the only band I could, AC/DC. When AC/DC releases a record, sort of the whole world, it stops rotating. Metallica's on the talk shows. They did like the movie theater experience with it. They did these like pop-up things in big cities where I'm not sure what it was, merchandise booths or something. So when Metallica does something, they do it big. The packaging on the album seems to be really nice. I haven't gotten it yet. Haven't decided if I'm going to get it on vinyl or what I'm going to do. So the packaging seems really nice. I mean, they really do know how to generate excitement. So that's why I feel so bad about this, that I'm not particularly excited about the record. So, okay, I'm really curious what you guys think. I want to hear the people out there that love this record. Tell me what it is you love about this record. I want to hear the people who maybe feel like me, that are indifferent towards it. And if you don't like the record, tell me what you don't like about the record also. All right, let me know down below. Till we see you again. Make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.